I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, naturopathic doctor. I hate email. Hate. I'm trying to remember a time when I found email exciting. And I'm 41. I went to university kind of right at the beginning of online learning platforms. The program that I went to actually was quite innovative in having an online messaging board that you could ask questions about your courses. Students could communicate with one another and could communicate with faculty. And we had emails. We had emails associated with our university, but that was not the sole way of communicating. There still was so much that was done in person. You asked lots of questions in person, and the people that were, connected to you from your courses and whatnot were just not that accessible, which meant, lots of things. It meant that you needed to be relatively self-reliant. You needed to try and answer your own questions because, you wouldn't see that person for a couple of days. And maybe you needed an answer before you were going to see them. And so you had to kind of try and figure it out on your own before you saw them. And then as a last resort, you would email a professor, an employer, and you would sit down at the computer and write out this poetry level email explaining what you had already done to try and find the answer and why you needed to reach out and let them, I know you have office hours coming up. I would really appreciate it if you would take a second to respond because I really can't figure this out on my own. And maybe we could argue and say that level of apologeticness was not totally necessary, or maybe was even harmful, I guess, in feeling that way, that we had to kind of apologize for our own existence to these professors. And yet, when I reflect on some of the challenges that I personally have with email, I can look actually pretty fondly back in those moments and think that maybe there's some magic that's been lost with the way that we currently manage and think about email and DMs and whatnot right now. So for context, I am not the most organized human being. I'm a very, very good visionary project manager. I can make ideas come to fruition. I know which billion steps need to be done to make a product or project go live. And I'm very good at the long game, meaning that I can, map out over the course of a year what needs to happen for something to drop. That's really my skill set. What I'm not good at is the minutia of paperwork. I've got an informal diagnosis of ADHD, and that is a very challenging piece for me to manage in my life. This is this highlighted issue with email, but I truly, and after working with tens of thousands of patients, believe that there's more of us that are struggling with this aspect of our lives, and I really wanted to have a solid discussion about it because I actually think that we're all part of the problem, and I actually think we can all be part of the solution if we can name what some of the issues actually are. So I've got lots of issues with email, and I'm going to go through them kind of in no particular order and sort of highlight where I see some of the problems being. And really it is about the overall themes is sort of not well thought out questions, not really well planned, or being that like personally responsible for yourself. Email, I think, breeds, or the way we use email right now, breeds this lack of self-sufficiency and self-reliance. It prevents people from making autonomous decisions in their work and in their life. And it creates or puts responsibility on other people for you to move forward or succeed. And I know that sounds like a really like, how did you get there, Jordan? That you think that email is like the demise of the independent thinker. But I honestly do believe that our access to each other and to other people have created this real problem within ourselves of being self-sufficient. I also think some of the challenges that we have right now is that we've brought all of those mechanisms of communication down to this same playing field, and almost view each way of interacting with someone as being of equal importance, of equal urgency. And so, for example, I currently have 4 emails. I have a university email, a personal email, and 2 work emails. I then also will oversee a 5th office email. I have 3 social media accounts, which each have direct messaging. I have 3 Facebook accounts, which also have direct messaging. And regardless of the instructions, regardless of the autoresponder, regardless of the just straight up ignoring messages that come in through channels that are not appropriate, that doesn't actually solve any of the problems. So between patients sending direct messages that then get directed to, contact the staff, and then they don't, and they, direct message again, or people sending messages through direct message, and then when they're ignored, just direct messaging again saying, I can't believe you're ignoring me, when it's very obvious that this is not a DM-worthy conversation on a social media platform. And then with all of those multiple emails, people emailing the wrong inbox, people replying to, say, invoice emails, and then having their emails bounce or go somewhere they're not supposed to, but then not taking responsibility for that. So I see this really big problem where there are so many channels that people can get a hold of you. We've brought all of those channels onto some sort of weird equal playing field that suddenly replying to a weightlifting video on Instagram about your medical concerns are supposed to, capture my attention and get a response, like a medical response, the same way as if you literally phoned my medical clinic, right? Like we've put those two things on the same playing field, and we're holding people accountable for messages when I think I get somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1,000 notifications per day. And I know not all of those notifications are messages, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 pokes per day. And my guess is that yours is not that far off that, even though I know we're different and my work life is different and public and online, etc. But my guess is that you have somewhere in the neighborhood of those number of notifications or things that come into your day or your inbox at the same time, right? The same as me. So the challenges I have, and I'm going to try and go duality here and flip back and forth between being responsible for our outbound messages, but also recognizing the challenges with our inbound messages, okay? Because we're all both. We're all responsible for our outbound messages, and we all are the victim of our inbound messages. And I want to just try and sit in the middle of all of that and talk about them from both sides. So when you're listening, try and sit on both sides of it. Try and be like, oh my God, am I doing that? Am I sending messages on Instagram that don't belong there? But also thinking to yourself, wait a minute, am I accepting messages on Instagram that shouldn't be there? like do your best to try and sit in both, because I honestly think for us to get through this that we all need to take responsibility for both our outbound and our inbound inbox. One of the things that I've struggled with email is just how accessible it can appear that you are, whether or not you actually are accessible. Email, and I've said this to my husband, I feel like email is someone putting something on your to-do list, right? Someone else is saying, I have something for you to do. And if we were in real life, if we, like at some point, we would tell that person to stop, right? If they walked up to you every morning, you know, this person named email and said, I have 50 things that I need you to do today. You'd be like, well, wait, like I had my own list of stuff I needed to do today. I can't do your list, or I can maybe do one thing on your list, but I can't do all of those things. And Mr. Email eventually would be like, okay, you know, that's fair. You're right. You have a lot of things on your to-do list. These 50 things I was about to hand you actually don't fit in your day. And yet, for some reason, we don't actually think about our inbound messages that way, right? We see them as this obligation of things to do. Whereas if I showed up at your workplace or stood beside your bed in the morning and said, hi, here's 40 things I need you to do today, you'd eventually tell me to fuck off, right? And you'd be like, Jordan, I have a list. Like, you're too late, pal. Like, I got stuff to do. And yet, for some reason, email is this like thing that goes in your to-do list that you can't predict what's coming a lot of the time. I mean, sometimes we're waiting for an email from someone, but a lot of the time these are these uninvited to-do list items that you didn't ask for, you didn't know they were coming. So how on earth are we supposed to time manage that? And there was a long time where I thought it was me, I thought it was my ADHD, I can't manage email. But when I started to look at it from this perspective, I'm like, no. Someone is literally showing up out of the blue and asking to put something on my to-do list. Why and when did that become okay? Why did it become okay for me to, like, why is it not okay, say in a different way, for me to put that like 3 days from now, that ask? Where if you do that, right, if someone emails you out of the blue a task and it takes you 3 days to respond, like how many times have they emailed you in between those two times? And now they've like added like these other things in your to-do list. Now you have to read the email that says, did you get my email? But their email came out of the blue and was a task that you didn't ask for, that was assigned to you. And your availability to do that task is 3 days from now, based on your schedule. And so you can see that inbound inbox, like we've got a bit of a problem that people are putting stuff on our to-do list and finding it unacceptable when we time manage it appropriately and put it on a time that we can actually do it. And so when I started to look at it in that way, I felt less bad about myself, right? I felt less bad. I tried to imagine it as someone showing up at my desk saying, hi, I have this thing here I need you to do. And me looking at them square in the eye and saying, amazing, I'll get to it on Thursday. Because that's how that interaction would actually go if we saw each other in real life, right? We'd negotiate when it was actually okay for me to do it. So I think thinking about it in that way, like thinking about your inbox in that way, can give you a little bit of relief. And truly, a lot of the things, and this is kind of leading into the second point, a lot of the things that we're emailed about, people could actually solve those problems on their own. And if you time manage yourself well and respond to those emails when you can respond to those emails, turns out people actually solve a lot of their own problems before you get back to them. Now, I'm not suggesting that you ignore all emails, right? And so don't get extreme on me here where you're like, that can't happen in my life, Jordan. I'm asking you to consider whether or not there are some emails that come in that don't need a reply right away, and that if you waited, that person or that thing might actually resolve itself. It's funny, I was, blow drying my hair one morning, and my husband came in, and he is a zero inbox guy. He has 0 emails in his inbox. I have 17,000 unread emails in my inbox, but he's at 0. And he came in, and he was struggling for a little window of time with, people asking for things from him. And he came in, and he was like, you know what? I had this email from this person, and they honestly could have just figured it out on their own, and I didn't respond. And then they just emailed me and said they figured it out on their own. And as he was saying it, he was like, oh my God, you do this all the time. He's like, this is the dark side. This is, you just don't reply sometimes, Jordan. And I was like, yeah, I just don't reply. Because my second point here about that inbox, and I want you to now try and sit in the inbox before we do that, before we go over there, I want you to think about the response times that you expect from others. So maybe we can happily be like, you know what? If you put something on my to-do list, I'll decide when I do it, right? We can all get in that camp and be super excited about that boundary that we're going to set. You also need to be okay with other people setting that boundary. And I get frustrated when I see, especially women, saying to each other, like, girl power, go, yeah, boss woman, work-life balance, set those boundaries. But when those boundaries are actually set, we hate each other for it. We say, that bitch, she didn't email me back fast enough. If you're going to time manage your emails, then please make it acceptable that other people do too. And when you email something, unless you're emailing, hey, my carotid artery got severed and I'm bleeding out, which really that shouldn't be an email for obvious reasons. There's not that many things that are happening in your life that are email worthy that are also an emergency. If you're choosing email as the mode of communication, let's just acknowledge that it is not an emergency. And so let's let each other time manage our email inbox, and they will get back to you when they can get back to you. Especially if it's someone that you adore and respect, they also probably are really fucking busy. And so let's let them time manage. So let's sit on both sides of that coin. We're going to boundary our email and we're going to put it on our to-do list where it belongs. And we also are going to allow that from each other. So my other challenge with email, and going back to my story about my husband there, is that email and the level of accessibility that we feel we have, or that it appears we have with others, creates a lack of self-sufficiency, right? It's very easy for you to move stuff off your own plate by asking someone else. I don't know what I should put in my smoothie. I'm going to email someone, or I'm going to DM someone about that. I can't find my DM. Where should I shop for email? What if we took that away? What if we took that choice away? What would you do? And I think it's a really good sort of self-check that when you're about to send an email out, that you check with yourself whether or not this is something that you can solve on your own, right? And solve on your own in the next day. Again, if you were going to email about it, it's probably not an emergency. But let's sit with that for a second. If you have a question and it's not an emergency and it can take a day to answer, can you spend the next day trying to answer it on your own? Because what that actually does, right? Like we're all totally on board with that, like teach a man to fish kind of thing. And yet we actually would just like someone else to answer all of our questions for us. And with how accessible information is, we're breeding this acceptability of just turning to the person beside you and asking them, where do I find this? How do I do this? What should I do here? Or we DM them, or we send them an email without really looking inside of ourselves, being like, how could I do this if I was by myself and left up to my own device? Or over the next day, can I try and solve this challenge? And if I can't, what are the resources that I need to access in order to answer it? And sometimes at the end of all of that, we have to email someone. But I do think that we are emailing quickly. We're sending incomplete thoughts. My husband and I joke, like we were engaged with a financial institution. We were looking at moving, and we were engaging with a financial institution and asking some questions about, moving and pre-approval and whatnot. And the emails we were getting back, I'm like, is this person sitting on the toilet? Like no capital letters, no periods. And I am not a stickler for punctuation or spelling, but also incomplete. Like answering one of 5 questions with no capitals and no periods. So when we go to send an email as an outbound, right? Like I'm talking about your outbound inbox. Let's take a second and think, one, did I answer all of the things, or did I collect all my thoughts before I'm even sending this email? Because sending 6 emails that could be 1, right? Again, thinking we're putting something else on someone else's to-do list. Don't send 6 emails over 3 days when you could have sent 1. Let's form our thoughts. Let's send complete sentences, and let's send it through the channel that's actually appropriate. right? I think we should all work to and strive for that. And we need to hold each other responsible and accountable for that on a professional level as well. I work with lots of mental health professionals and professionals for my own health. And I've had professionals say, oh, just send me a text if. And I'm like, no, I'm not texting you. How else can I get in touch with you? Through your office, right? I don't want to send you a text. I don't want to send you a DM. I'm not going to give you an update on Instagram, right? I respect the professionals I work with. I'm going to access them in that respectful, professional way. So we need to hold each other accountable for this as well. Because I think we can easily fall in that trap of like, yeah, send me a DM. But no, we don't want DMs. So when you're going to send an email in that outbox, you need to self-check whether or not there is this remote possibility that you could be self-sufficient about this thing that you're emailing. Or are you quickly moving something off your plate onto someone else's? Because you don't want the opposite to happen, right? How many times have you got an email that where someone's replied to the email that has your answer in it and is like, I don't know the answer to this, and you're like, see below, right? That's what we're doing to each other. We're not reading all the way through. We're sending emails from the toilet with no capital letters and no periods. We're not asking all of our questions in the same email, so we're sending 6 over 3 days. It lands in someone else's to-do list, and then we're asking them why they haven't got back to us yet. We're all responsible for both sides of this. Now, if you're the receiver, so your inbox is flooded with questions that people could do on their own, this is a really great opportunity for some self-reflection on leadership. Right? I think it's very common that when people ask us a question in a leadership position, we just give them yes or no answers. Can we order cups for the water cooler? Yep. Sure, that sounds great. Can I get a new toner for the printer? Sounds good. Sure. But what we're not doing is helping the people that ask us things feel confident enough to never ask again. And there's actually like a very, very, very simple leadership strategy that you can take forward where when people come to you with a question and your goal is to help them be able to answer that question on their own in the future, instead of praising them for coming to you, which basically that's what we do when we say, yeah, sounds good, order those water cooler cups, instead is saying, that sounds like a good decision. What we want to praise is decision-making with each other. We don't want to praise the outcome, because when you praise the decision-making, then that person actually feels a little bit more confident that they never have to ask you that again. And you know what? Water cooler cups will magically arrive from Amazon 2 months from now because they feel more confident answering that question on their own. We use that same strategy with patients too. So patients will say, I didn't really know what to do, and so I just grabbed the whey protein powder from Costco. And instead of what you need to praise is the decision. That sounds like a great decision. You didn't know how to put more protein in your breakfast, and you made a decision and tried it. That's great. Great job. Good decision. Versus praising other things that make that person not feel as confident about making a decision again on their own in the future. So if your inbox is full of people asking you to confirm their own decisions, you need to praise their decisions so that they stop asking you, right? The other strategy there is that you just ignore it, and eventually they'll order the water cooler cups. And if that's not your current leadership strategy, it's definitely mine. But if it's not your current leadership strategy, then maybe that's a worthy conversation to just have with your team around the things they come to you for. We all feel like a bottleneck in some way in our work, right? We all feel like there are things that can't get done unless we say yes, or we move it forward, or we sign the paper. I'm always excited about people looking for opportunities for that to be happening less often. It makes the people that work with you way more happy too if they feel more like they can make just decisions about those kinds of things. So praise decisions. If your inbox is full of people looking for confirmation about things they've decided, praise the decision, don't praise the thing. But the other piece is are we communicating well around what we want email to be used for in our life, right? And again, if your inbox is flooded with people that are lacking some self-sufficiency in your life, I think asking that question of like, this isn't really working for me. It looks like you're needing a lot of support. Is there another way that we can get you that? Is there something you need to buy? Is there a strategy we need to implement? Is there training that you need to have in order to feel like this doesn't require sending an email? And just holding people accountable for those kinds of emails. A really great piece to put back, and I put this back to even my clinicians when they ask me questions, I'll say, well, what have you tried? Because that's a great question to help some self-reflection around whether or not the email was the very first thing they tried to solve their problem or whether it was the last. Right? And I have 100% respect for someone who says, you know what? I tried to look it up on my own. I looked back through this document. I tried to watch the training video and I still can't figure it out. I'm like, great, let's figure this out. But when someone says, oh, I just wasn't sure, so I started with you first. Remember that I have 17,000 unread emails and so do you. Well, maybe you're a zero inbox person, but that means you've read all 17,000 of them. We want people to be self-reliant, and a great question back if your inbox is overflowing is, what have you already tried? What have you already thought of? What have you already done? Right? We want to put the responsibility back in other people's court. Don't put your stuff in my to-do list when you haven't tried yet. And then the last piece there is just those multiple channels for people getting a hold of you. And I don't really know how other people manage this. I generally don't respond to questions that are sent through social media channels that shouldn't be there. And I'm always amazed at the kinds of things that people are willing to ask or send through social media. Because people say like, my parent is really struggling with this particular health concern and I really, really would like to get them help. I hope that you answer me. Like, you really, really would like to get them help? Or someone will send a message saying, how do I book an appointment on Instagram? And it ends up in my junk folder. And I only would have found it if I'd looked in my junk folder. But the resources to book those appointments are like right there. And I'm sure you have these exact examples. My example is my lived experience of clinical practice, but I'm sure you have those other examples where you're like, I'm pretty sure that you like clicked the button that you needed to click in order to email me. And anyways, but those multiple channels, I think, as an outbound, you really need to consider, are you using the appropriate channel to get your message across to the person you're trying to connect with? Because I think that so many messages can be lost in outer space, especially when they're sent through social media channels. But the other side is your inbox strategy and the way that you accept messages actually the most appropriate based on your industry, based on your goals, based on your boundaries, based on your bandwidth, right? And there's nothing wrong with, directing all people towards one channel if you don't want to look at multiple inboxes. I think that needs to be considered to be very acceptable. So I just talked about my problem with email for 27 minutes. Let's talk about some solutions. And so I'm sure that as you were listening, you can kind of see yourself on both sides of that coin, right? Like, I've definitely had moments where rather than looking something up myself, I put it on someone else's to-do list, or I accessed them through a channel that was not actually appropriate. And then you're also probably reflecting on maybe your leadership in various areas of your life where people feel like it's appropriate to put stuff on your to-do list, right? Remember, if I showed up beside your bed and was like, hi, here's 75 things I need you to do today, right? What would you say? Say, I can't. I don't know where I would do that. And yet, for some reason, when you wake up and you open your phone and you refresh your email, we're totally okay with there being 75 things on our to-do list there, and we feel compelled to finish them all before the end of the day. So let's talk about some solutions. And I'm not an expert at this, right? I'm like being very open that I'm not an expert at this. I do think that this is creating lots of problems for people when we're talking about burnout and that long-term chronic buzz of responsibility and stress that's kind of carrying around in the background. This is something we need to address. So some solutions that I've looked at, and not all of them work for me, they have or haven't worked in various aspects of my life. And some of these things may not even be accessible to you, but I want you to at least think about some of these options. The first one is just literally not worrying about it. I think the stress around getting back to people and without doing this sort of fact check around whether or not it's an emergency or whether or not it needs to be dealt with ASAP is incredibly important. If you are worrying about it and you can also acknowledge some of the problems that I said earlier, I think that one of your greatest strategies is going to be to stop worrying about it. They never stop. You'll never get to the end, right? you can't predict what's coming. And that's like if we put an animal model, if we created an animal model for email, right? And let's say the stress of an email is like getting a 1 out of 10 little zap shock, right? So it's like just kind of like bzz. If we put a mouse in a cage and we were going to zap them 75 times per day, when we zap them, they needed to do something. And now maybe my animal model's falling apart. They don't know when the zaps are coming and they can't stop them. And no matter how many times they do the little task, right? Push the button or whatever today, they have to do it tomorrow too, right? There's no getting to the bottom of the pile. They can't predict when the little zaps are coming. That is a recipe for depression. And we actually see depressive models in animals used exactly like this, where when we zap a thing and it doesn't know the zap is coming, they lose the will to live. I'm not even joking. The animal loses the will to live very quickly. They can't control the zaps. They don't know when they're coming. They never stop. And that is exactly what your email is. You can't control what's coming in. You don't know when it's going to come. And when you go to bed and wake up tomorrow, it will also be there. And so we need to emotionally detach ourselves from it in order to live because there isn't actually an alternative. You have to stop worrying about it. It has to be a thing that you're like, it's a thing that's there. Is it my sole purpose in life to respond to everybody's email? No, it just isn't. So that's number one. Stop worrying about it. The second, or like the bunch of other strategies, is mostly around creating systems and processes that are going to work for you. I've experimented with email muting, right? Because I will compulsively look at my email. Even though I hate it, I will still compulsively look at it on my phone, on my computer. I have found that muting my inbox during the day and only allowing the emails to come in once in the day, like at 3:30 when I'm done with patients, the emails are allowed to arrive in my inbox. I've had some successes with that. I think it helps me be less distracted during the day. It helps me like squirrel way less because I just get them all at once at the end. It also lets me filter through like some of those things that just need to be marked as read, like a receipt or something. And it also reminds me how many sales emails I get that I should just frankly unsubscribe from because I get them all at the same time, right? And you can be like, ooh, I just don't need that email anymore. I bought a snowsuit for my kid there once. Like I do not need to know that they have mitts on sale. And so when you see it all at once, it really helps you understand and theme out your emails rather than like if you sporadically get them in through the day, it's really hard to see the trend. If you get them all at once, you can be like, oh, John from accounting, he's emailing me like 50 times in a day. It's so much easier to see when you get them all at one time. It also allows you to block out the actual time to respond. And so if you would like to be responsible for emailing for 1 hour a day, mute your inbox and let them all arrive during that 1 hour so that you don't end up doing this sort of sporadic work throughout the day. There's also some systems or processes that you can implement, like having someone else read your email and help them or have them categorize them for you or prioritize them for you, or using things like project management or a hierarchy in your inbox, and so that it's very easy to see the things that are super important, the things that need to be responded to right away, or the things that could be ignored for now. I think that can be really quite helpful. I even use, I'll assign myself tasks in my project management program that I use that is accessible to my team, and they can see sort of various aspects of it. I can tag my team members if I'm like, I got to respond to this email by Friday and I need you to help hold me accountable to that. And it's all in this sort of project management where we are looking at the week over the long haul rather than hour by hour, which can be quite helpful. So there's going to be different strategies that work for you, but I want you to know that having a system actually is completely necessary given the volume of touch points we have with people during the day. So that's really important. And then the last one is just not responding, which I think goes along with the not worrying about it. There are a lot of emails that do not need to be responded to. And I'm not talking about the person that works across from you that you're co-working on a project with. You can't just ignore their email, right? That's not what I mean. It's the emails that are asking you, for your time, or asking you for a free consult, or asking you if they can come on your platform, or asking you if you want to volunteer for something and you can't, right? You just flat out know that you can't. Don't respond, right? No response is a response. And that's actually a tagline that we will use in our household because of the number of asks that we get where people are asking. You have to think about why are people asking you for things? It's for their own interest. No one is arriving in your inbox these days to present you with an opportunity that's going to change your life. They're asking for you to change their life with an opportunity. And so not all of those emails need to be responded to. Or if people are emailing you frequently, the response can be, it sounds like you have a lot of questions about this. I'm going to ask that you collect all of your questions over the next 3 days and send them all in one email. Responsibilities back on them. It sounds like you haven't thought about this very much yet. I'm going to leave it with you for a couple of days, and when you have better formed questions, you can come back to me. Now it's in their court. Right? Now you're not patchy trying to respond to their questions, probably not doing a good job, but just because they happen to email you about it. You also can very much ask for the thing that they're asking you about to be better organized, for it to land in your legit to-do list. So if they are emailing you quickly about something and now you are missing information, you need to do some research, you have questions, is to put that piece back with the person who's asked and say that this needs to actually arrive. Here are the steps that you need to take before this is something that I can do or acknowledge. And so again, if we sit on the other side, you also can do that when you're sending your outbound messages, right? Reflect for a second. When you're emailing someone something, are you giving them all the things they need to even know what to do with your email? We'll get emails from people and I don't even know where they live in the world, let alone whether or not I can help them. I don't even know if they know what they're asking, right? Because the email is sent probably from the toilet. So if your outbound emails probably need to look clearer, more well thought out, and to provide the person that you're emailing with enough information that they can actually support you. Don't send your email without your full name. Don't send your email without your contact information. Don't send your email, right, without signing it. And I know these sound like such small things, but really when we look at all the emails that are being sent all around, to all the people, there's a huge percentage of them that are these incomplete, half-formed thoughts where you're trying to push something that you half thought of onto someone else's to-do list. And that's causing all of us to be burnt out. So your outgoing emails need to look better. They need to look more well-formed. And maybe even just don't send it right away, right? Collect all the things you need in order to be able to send to that person versus whipping it off very quickly. And I think that if we as an entire collective sat with this whole email thing and just slowed it all down for 1 second, that we'd all have less emails, or we'd feel more excited about them when they arrived in our inbox. Do you remember a time that you were excited about getting emails? I barely do. I barely remember being like, ooh, there's an email. It's there, in my history, but it's barely there. And part of that is because we're using this communication strategy with each other that is not respecting each other's time, each other's intellect, right? Whereas if you sat down and thought, how would I form my thoughts in a great way? And I'm not asking you to write an essay, but how can I form my thoughts in a great way that demonstrate what I've already tried, where I'm stuck and why I need this person to step in and what my expectations are around turnaround time, acknowledging that I'm asking for something to go on someone else's to-do list. If we all just take a breath and we all stop responding to emails that don't need to be responded to and stop worrying about it so much, maybe we can have a better relationship with it. And so I know that the person with 17,000 unread emails isn't really the right person to do a podcast about emails, but I think it's speaking to some bigger issues about lack of ownership and responsibility, about not creating enough boundaries for ourselves and not respecting the boundaries of others, about us wanting each other to have work-life balance, but also wanting an instantaneous response. We can't have it all. And so your inbound inbox and your outbound, I guess it's inbound inbox, outbound outbox, needs to slow down. It needs to be better thought out. And we need to collectively have a different relationship with the way that we connect with each other. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. My goal is to help you feel more confident about your health. Please remember that what we talked about today in the podcast does not constitute medical advice, nor was a doctor-patient relationship formed. If you have questions about your healthcare or about how today's topic pertains to you, please take it up with your family doctor, your specialist, or someone on your health team.